Hello, I promised you a follow up to our Bible study on the book of Ruth, looking at relationships from a biblical perspective. And this is the beginning of that follow up series. So we're going to start off with Nehemiah. But before I do that, let me explain a little bit about why I think it's important for women, especially single women, to understand biblical characteristics of godly men. That is because oftentimes we may relate one person to another, or we may uh, measure them by our experiences with other people. Oftentimes, it takes maybe a few relationships before we get it right. And so I want to help alleviate some of that concern and some of that drama that can happen in the process of beginning relationships or actually putting yourself in a position to possibly become a bride. So I thought it would be helpful because we talked about Boaz so much, and we talked about how his character, we talked about him being a friend first with Ruth. We talked about how Ruth was honoring and submissive to him. And we did talk a little bit about Boaz concerning his business and how he treated Ruth as she was gleaning in his field. And so, what I want us to understand is that Boaz is not the only man in the Bible that has these worthy characteristics that any woman would want her life to be filled with. And so I thought it would be fun. I thought it would be useful. I thought it would be helpful, excuse me, to share some men of the Bible that also may fill the bill or fit the need that you have as far as what you're looking for in a godly man. So we're going to start with Nehemiah, and this is the introduction video. I'm going to use some of the notes that I have here and just share about the overview of his life without taking up too much time, some key qualities of Nehemiah, and why he would make a great partner. So here we go. Nehemiah is a prominent figure in the Old Testament, known primarily for his role in rebuilding the broken down walls of Jerusalem. The book of Nehemiah recounts his story as a Jewish cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes of Persia. And if you've heard of King Artaxerxes, you've heard of him in the book of Esther as well. Upon learning about the ruined state of Jerusalem, Nehemiah is deeply moved and prays to God for guidance. Granted permission by the king, he returns to Jerusalem, rallies the people, and leads the rebuilding efforts despite opposition and challenges. Nehemiah's leadership, faith, and dedication shine throughout the narrative. Did you notice any key words in this summary? Let me point them out to you. Nehemiah is deeply moved. He prays for guidance. He submits to his authority. He did not move out to do anything about what he had in his heart until he got permission from the king. He rallies the people, which means he knows how to gather people together for a task. He leads the rebuilding efforts. So he's not asking them to do something he himself is not willing to do. And he withstands opposition and challenges gracefully. Amen. He walks in leadership, faith, and dedication. These are some wonderful qualities for any single woman to look for while she is hoping and expecting for a godly man for the purpose of marriage. Amen. So let's look a little closer at some of these qualities of Nehemiah. His faithfulness, his unwavering faith in God guides his decisions and his actions. That is a wonderful thing to look at it when it comes to looking for a godly man, because faithfulness is developed over time. The scriptures say, if you're faithful over a few things, I'll make you ruler over much. And so faithfulness is developed over time, and it's also realized over time by other people to be considered faithful. Nehemiah's unwavering faith in God guides his decisions and actions. What does that tell us about Nehemiah's character? That he doesn't just shoot from the hip. He's not hasty in his decisions. He's very thoughtful, very considerate about the decisions that he has to make in order to fulfill the very thing that God has put in his heart. He shows his spiritual depth and commitment through his faithfulness to God, his faithfulness to his employer, and his faithfulness to the people and the community for the walls that he's trying to rebuild for their own safety. Amen. Now, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king. He wasn't in charge like Boaz was. Amen. But he was a cupbearer. He was an employee to the king. Matter of fact, daily, Nehemiah placed his life on the line as the king's cupbearer. How is that? Because he was the one, when the food or the drink was brought to the king, Nehemiah was the one that tasted it first, not the king. Nehemiah tasted it to ensure that it would not harm the king. Amen. And so he is faithful in that. He did that for years. He was in the face of the king, meaning they were face to face, and he was constantly putting his life on the line to ensure that the king would walk in safety day after day. Amen. Another key quality of Nehemiah is this: his leadership skills, which he demonstrated in this wall building project in the book of Nehemiah. It took 52 days for it to be accomplished, for the wall to be built, but he was faced with so much opposition and challenges from political leaders and from, people that were stirring up the community and trying to get him to stop the work that was being done to keep Jerusalem in a vulnerable state. Amen. And Nehemiah's heart was so moved by compassion for the people that he prayed, first of all, to God. God gave him a vision. His employer gave him leave of absence, and they began to get this work done. He rallied the people. He rallied the tools. He rallied all of the things that needed to be done to get this job accomplished. And yet, Nehemiah didn't own any of it. He was simply serving God and the people. Amen. But his leadership, his willingness to go out first, his willingness to be in the front, his willingness to be on the front line. He had been doing that every day by being the cupbearer. Amen. And so now he's taken that same responsibility and diligence out to a project that needs to be completed. Amen. And so he demonstrates strong leadership skills. The people trusted him. That's another thing you can write down. There's so many characteristics in here. The people trusted him. They trusted his organization skills. They trusted the directions that he gave them without even seeing the completion of the wall yet. They trusted the directions that he gave them while he was in the midst of being persecuted by those who didn't want the job to be completed. You have to read Nehemiah chapters 1, at least 1 through 5 to get the whole story. And another thing about Nehemiah is that he's a person of integrity. His character is one of integrity, that he is honest and just and trustworthy. And we see that in the account of how he deals with his employer, the king, and how he deals with the people, and how he makes it his decision not to stop the work, even though it would be the easier thing to do, right? Sometimes we just take the easy way out. And when you take the easy way out, you're going to have to come that way again, right? But Nehemiah didn't take the easy way out. He could have. Just like they said to Jesus, come down from that cross. You saved others. Why don't you save yourself? But he wasn't there for himself. And Nehemiah wasn't doing this for himself. He was doing it for God and for the people of God. Amen. And then he has compassion. I love this sentence that talks about how Nehemiah is deeply moved and prays to God for guidance. It is the deeply moved part that grabs my heart. Amen. Deeply moved, full of compassion. Amen. He's sensitive to what is going on around him. Amen. Nehemiah is a great role model. I hope you're taking notes. He's sensitive to what's going on around him. He mourns for his people and he seeks their welfare above his own comfort. And then he perseveres despite threats against his life, threats against the work, threats against the people that were helping him. I mean, he just had to deal with all kinds of opposition that had come up against him. And Nehemiah was perseverant. He refused to stop the work that had begun. And because of that, in a short amount of time, with the help and the grace of his God, as he said, that thing was done. The mission was accomplished. The job was fulfilled. The assignment was completed because he didn't quit. And then he is a man of wisdom. He prays for guidance and makes careful, thoughtful decisions. Before we talk about why Nehemiah would make a great marriage partner, I want you to kind of rewind or go back on this video if you didn't already and write down some characteristics that are important to you in a mate or even in a friend. Because remember, Ruth and Boaz were friends before they were husband and wife. Amen. So write down some characteristics. Start taking note and writing a journal of what you would like in a guy friend or what you would like in a husband down the road, the different characteristics that are important to you. So let's talk a little bit for a minute about why Nehemiah would make a great marriage partner. Now, you may not agree with all of these, and that's okay. These are just some things for you to think about. Amen. Nehemiah's character traits make him an exemplary marriage partner. His faithfulness and devotion to God provide a strong foundation for a spiritually centered relationship. Why is that important? Because whether you have a friendship or whether you have a marriage-ship relationship, things are going to come. Trouble's going to come. Opposition is going to come. Situations disagreements are going to come. It is part and parcel of the whole package. And so having a strong foundation for a spiritually centered relationship is vital. It's vital to every successful marriage relationship. God is the center of it all. Nehemiah's leadership and integrity show that he would be dependable and trustworthy. Why? Because he completed the project. He didn't let anything stop him. He kept his word to the employer, his king, and he kept his word to the vision that God had shown him about the walls needing to be repaired. Amen. And so dependability and trustworthiness are essential qualities for building a lasting relationship. Nehemiah's compassion and his empathy ensure that he would care deeply for his spouse. Amen. Having compassion and empathy, meaning that you're able to feel what the other person is feeling, even if you're not going through it. But you can feel it. You can understand. He can understand what you may be feeling in any given situation. And even if he doesn't, because there are some times where you just don't understand, but at least he would be present. Amen. So his compassion and empathy would ensure that he would care for his spouse, while his perseverance and wisdom suggest he would navigate challenges with patience and understanding. I mean, those are characteristics that you want in a relationship. Compassion, empathy, perseverance, wisdom, able to stand up against challenges, patient and understanding. All of these things are helpful. Now, let me say this, because you may say, well, I have a guy and he's not quite like Nehemiah, but Nehemiah did not develop these characteristics overnight. They didn't show up overnight. I'm sure they were developed over time. Amen. And so sometimes some things take time to come to the forefront, but they are seeds and they can be developed. Amen. So altogether, Nehemiah embodies the qualities of a loving, supportive, and principled partner, making him an ideal choice for marriage. Now, of course, Nehemiah, his story and the overview of his story and the summary is not necessarily focused on marriage, but it is focused on wonderful characteristics that would help support a godly marriage. How is that for starting off with our series on biblical characteristics of godly men? We have some more that we're going to be sharing. I just wanted to kick it off with Nehemiah, and I think that was a wonderful choice. Amen. So again, go back and listen to it. I said a lot, gave you a lot of characteristics, a lot of pointers for you to take note of, write them down, take them to your prayer closet, and talk to God about your heart's desire and what it is that you're looking for in a spouse or in a friend. Amen. I hope that helps. Until we meet again, God bless.